Welcome back to my channel where philosophy is for everyone. Today we're going to be taking on the Socratic challenge, but before we do, don't forget to subscribe if you want to get notifications each time I upload a new video. And now let's get started. In today's video, we're going to look at one of the most popular Socratic challenges, one that has generated quite a bit of discussion online. This challenge is morality just a construct? More specifically, is morality just a human invention? We'll first examine the challenge, then we'll see how we might go about answering it. And finally, we'll consider what would happen if we decided that the answer was yes. Now, before we begin, here's a quick disclaimer. I'm going to be simplifying some concepts so that we can discuss them more easily. If you would like to learn more about these concepts, check out the additional resources provided. The question, is morality just a human invention, is actually more difficult than it might seem at first. For instance, when we think of human inventions, we normally think of things like computers, cell phones, or pizza. These are all physical objects that humans have created for particular purposes. So when we ask if morality is just a human invention, it seems to suggest that we're asking if it's something physical that humans created, say, in the same way that they created those other things. However, morality isn't a physical thing. It's not something that we hold in our hands. Instead, morality is a collection of ideas. It's the idea of good and evil, right and wrong, justice, fairness, etc. So asking if morality is a human invention isn't really the same as asking if we invented it in the same way that we invent physical objects. Instead, it's really a question about how these ideas came about. It's a question about why we believe what we do about morality. To put this another way, there are two ways we could possibly mean the phrase human invention. On the one hand, it could be asking if humans made up morality in the sense that people decided on certain ideas about what is right and wrong. Or on the other hand, it could be asking if humans invented morality in the sense that we came up with the concept because of something that happened outside of us, because of our environment or our biology, for example. In either case, though, the question isn't easy to answer. Let's start by considering a couple different possible answers. First, there's the answer that most of us probably intuitively think is correct. The idea is that morality is somehow objective. That is, there really is such a thing as what is right and what is wrong, independent of what any one person or group of people thinks. Some version of this view is held by most major world religions, for example. To Buddhists, Christians, Muslims, Hindus, and people of many other faiths, there really is a God who made rules about what is right and what is wrong and gave them to us. So from this perspective, the question of why we believe certain things are right and wrong is answered by the fact that they were revealed to us by a higher power. Another version of this view is called moral realism. According to moral realism, there really are objective moral facts. An example of a moral fact is the fact that torturing innocent people is wrong. Moral realists think that this isn't an opinion, it's a fact, a feature of reality, like the fact that water boils at 100 degrees Celsius. Now, just as there's more than one way to be a religious person, there's more than one way to be a moral realist. Different moral realists will disagree about how exactly we know what these facts are and what they say about the nature of reality. But they all agree that there really are objective moral facts and that our task is to figure out what they are. If moral realism is correct, then the answer to the Socratic challenge is no. Morality isn't just a human invention. Instead, it comes from outside of us. Either God gave us moral rules or the moral rules are just features of the universe. Now, there's also the opposite answer to the Socratic challenge, the answer that most philosophers think is correct. The answer that says, yes, morality is a human invention. Before we examine this view, though, let's take a step back and point out that there really is a third option. There's the possibility that the question is actually meaningless. You see, the question, is morality just a human invention, is built on the assumption that there's something outside of us that we could compare morality to. Basically, it assumes that there's a contrast between morality and whatever it is that caused it. But what if there isn't a contrast? What if there's no such thing as what caused it? What if the very idea of a cause is just something that we invented after the fact to make sense of the world? If this is right, then maybe the question of why we believe things to be right and wrong isn't the right question to ask. Maybe it should be something like, what led us to believe that certain things are right and wrong? Now, there are plenty of possible answers to this question. One particularly influential answer is the idea that morality evolved over time. According to this view, there really is not anything outside of us that explains why we think certain things are right and wrong. Instead, our ideas about morality developed gradually through natural processes, mostly as a means of helping us survive. Supporters of this view often point to the fact that young children naturally develop moral intuitions. As they grow older, they also tend to become more moral as they interact with others, as they work out ways to survive in groups. The details differ from thinker to thinker, but this is the general idea. According to this view, there really is no explanation for why our morals are the way that they are. Our morals just develop that way. A similar view is cultural relativism. According to this view, what we take to be right and wrong is determined by the society that we live in. An example of this is the difference between Western views on homosexuality and more traditional views found in many parts of the Middle East. From a cultural relativist perspective, there isn't a single right answer to the question of whether homosexuality is morally permissible. It just depends on what your culture happens to be. Finally, there's divine command theory. Remember, divine command theory is the idea that morality comes from God. God decides what is right and what is wrong and tells us. A common objection to divine command theory is that it doesn't explain why God chose to create the universe the way he did. Why didn't God decide that raping babies would be morally permissible? The answer is usually that God decided against that because it's bad, but this begs the question of why rape is bad. If God could have made anything he wanted into a moral requirement, why did he choose to prohibit rape? The only answer that divine command theorists typically have is that rape is bad because God said so. But that really just pushes the problem further back. Why did God say that rape was bad? The only answer is that God decided to say that rape was bad because it's bad, but this just begs the question of why rape is bad. So divine command theory doesn't really help us answer the Socratic challenge either. So far, we've been looking at 3 possible answers to the Socratic challenge. Morality is objective, or it's completely subjective, or it evolved because of our biology, but which of these is correct? Well, unfortunately, there's no easy answer. All 3 have their strengths and weaknesses. The objective view seems intuitive, but it relies on something outside of us. The subjective view is also appealing, but it has a hard time explaining how one person or group of people can say that something is right, while another person or group of people says that it's wrong. And the evolutionary view is also somewhat intuitive, but it seems to beg the question of why our intuitions are the way that they are. In the end, each person will have to decide for themselves which view they find most convincing. But regardless of which view we hold, there are still significant implications for the way that we approach the study of morality. As I mentioned earlier, the Socratic challenge takes many forms, but it always involves some version of Socrates' famous statement that we can't know what is right simply because someone said so. If we take the objective view, then the answer is yes. We can make laws about morality because our intuitions about morality are based on something outside of us. If we take the subjective view, then the answer is no. There's no justification for making laws about what is right and wrong because everything is ultimately a matter of opinion. And if we take the evolutionary view, then the answer is maybe. We can make laws about morality as long as those laws are based on our collective intuition about what is right and wrong, but no one view is better than anyone else's. This debate is important because it affects the way that we think about morality both on an individual level and a societal level. It also helps us understand some of the deeper issues involved in studying ethics, which is precisely what we'll be doing in the next video. So that's a look at the Socratic challenge. Do you think that morality is just a human invention, Why or why not? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and if you want to learn more about ethics, then be sure to check out my video on the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy's entry on ethics. Thanks for watching. See you next time.